You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, making our way through another week. And with just a moment, as we are so hoops-centric this time of year, just a moment today to step outside of the realm of college basketball and actually spend some time back in the world of college football, as we have seen this snowball get progressively larger and larger and larger. And now I feel like maybe we are soon to be consumed by the SEC, Big Ten, an expanded playoff, and what all that means for the Big 12 Conference, for Texas Tech, and for everyone else that is still aiming to live in what is clearly the Big Ten and the SEC's world. So we'll get into some of the things being reported as it relates to talks, meetings, convenings between the Big Ten and the SEC to kind of lay out a plan here. And there's a whole lot to digest and process, so this will just be one conversation, I'm sure, of many regarding this subject, Chris, but there is a lot of implication for everybody involved, that meaning the Big 12 and the Red Raiders, a little bit more selfishly speaking, as far as our interests go. So we'll get to all of the above, but I'm sure you agree with me, and we talked about this a little bit as far as basketball expansion was concerned on yesterday's episode, but there's always this kind of snowball nature to things being reported and talks being discussed or meetings being discussed or considered. And then before you know it, you are in an earth-shattering kind of change. And we've seen this sort of play out before. So just along for the ride again.
Yeah, like the basketball discussion we have, this has been floated now plenty. The different formats have been floated plenty. They're gonna pick one, nail it down, and move forward with it. And we knew this was a likelihood, and so this won't affect this coming fall's or December's playoff format or anything. But it's the year after. 26 is really when I guess the basketball and the football thing is going to be affected. So, but you're going to get more of a playoff in the college football, and there's a lot of interesting twists here, and some greed and some formatting and all that. And really it's going to change the sport large in part, because it's got intended or unintended consequences for what they may come up with. And then you sit there and you look at it from a Big 12 conference member and you say, is this good? Is this bad? Do we have more access? Does this further diminish our league? And like, are the is this widening the gap? Is this spin the wheel, man, and just kind of pick pick it on.
Let's start with the AQ aspect, because I think that's just a great spot to kick it off, whether in the 14 or 16 team proposal, which are the scenarios that are out there right now. We're talking about 4 automatic qualifying spots for the Big Ten. For the SEC, we're talking about 2 automatic qualifying spots for the ACC and the Big 12, and then 1 to the highest ranked group of 5 champion. That would include 1 or 3 at-large spots, one of those intended for Notre Dame, if those finish ranked inside the top 14. So 4-2, you and I have gotten into this conversation before, Chris, and there is some, maybe grim aspect for some fans out there, but there's some, I don't know, coming to grips with reality aspect to this, where you think about, all right, if you're locked in with this number, is that better than being in some fluid state where maybe you're locked out entirely or you're diminished to 1? Is there some embracing of reality that's just about, I guess, time to come to grips with? What do you think about the automatic qualifying aspect of this? Because I think really, to begin with, inclusion in this playoff is kind of where most conversations start on whatever Locked On podcast you may be listening to today, whether in the ACC or the Big 12 landscape or otherwise. Everybody wants to know, how are we involved? How are we getting in? How many of us?
Yeah. The general premise of this is extremely soft. There's an old saying, and it applies to sports or life and all that. But the home plate is 17 inches, and sometimes people want to widen it or shrink it to help whatever their situation is. In that analogy, it's like, well, the pitcher would love to widen the plate. The batter would love to shrink the plate. Parents do this with their children. It's like they want to negotiate how wide or small the plate is, depending on what they're dealing with. You can use that analogy in a variety of different ways. There was a guy that gave a speech years ago, a coach, and he was walked up in front of all these business leaders. He's got this home plate with a chain around his neck, and he talked for a long time. And everybody's like, well, what is this crazy dude doing with and the whole premise that he got to this analogy at the very end of it. This is the SEC and the Big Ten widening the plate. Okay. They are widening the plate and trying to grease the wheel to help out their situation. They're not really worried about the sport or everybody else. It's just, we want to make sure we're good. And I'll tell you who's the biggest proponents of this is the sorriest members of these leagues. The ones that you scratch your head and go, why are they even in this deal anyways? Your Purdue's, your Vanderbilt's, all of these folks, the also rans, the middle of the packs of these, they are like, hell yeah, man, absolutely. We don't have to be a blue blood member of this league. We can just be a member of this league, and we've got a real chance here. So they are the ones that are to really pushing this. And there was no need to do this. It was probably large in part going to work out this way anyways. But if their intention was to create a wider gap between their leagues and everybody else, I think they will succeed. If it was to also basically remove any need for a committee, theoretically, that's what you are doing. You are taking away any need for a group of people to kind of look at this, put a ranking together, and there'll still be one, but you've taken away really most, if not all, their power. And so I don't know. But okay, then the flip side is, okay, so you've got 2 out of your 16 teams in this format would get to go to the playoff. Is that best case scenario? Is that just harsh reality? Is that, I don't know. I mean, in this last year, BYU would have gone. In this last, I think if you were guaranteed to, BYU would have been, and they probably would have been a pretty good little addition to this deal in a 14 or 16 team deal. I could see
the most robbed team in the country last year as far as playoff invites.
Yeah, and I think the committee had them ranked a bit lower and all that. But again, if we're talking AQs, and see, and here, and I don't want to jump ahead, but I think that these conversations are connected. This will greatly affect, and really in every case, and it's up to kind of each house to clean up their own mess on how they get to this point. But each league will then get to determine what does our championship game mean? What do we want to get out of it? What do we want to do? Do we want 2 games? Do we want to create a little mini playoff within our league? And so all of those dynamics are pretty fascinating, because it's almost like you get to determine, hey, you get 4 of these or you get 2 of these, you tell us who you want in, and you figure out how to get to that point. And so why
do you go the route of expanding the championship aspect? Because I thought there was only one direction for it to go, and that was for them to say, we don't want to play the game. So I was interested to hear
you talking about championship game?
Yeah, conference championship game.
Yeah.
You mentioned maybe we play 2. Are you just throwing that out, or is that a real thing? First, today's episode brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go about your day, it's all happening with no stressing, no worrying, and no waiting. Now, this is taxes with Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Oh, it's a very real thing. And I don't know how this we will land on here, but this is absolutely what is being discussed. So let me just localize it from a Big 12 standpoint. You can do a couple of different things here, and I think all of it is being talked about. You can say, because one, keep in mind with all of this, follow the money, follow the dollar, and again, Brett Yormark has to weigh that maybe even more than some, because again, as the gap gets wider, he's still you gotta. So that may be more of a reason to do more than one game. Let me explain how we get to that point. You can do. I say to you, Brett, you get two teams into this deal. You determine how you want to do that. There will be a lot of discussion, administrators, coaches, whatever. You can do something like, well, let's just play 1 and 2 in a conference championship game, however the rankings are or the standings, whatever, and they're both more than likely going to go to the playoff. Okay, so the loser in this scenario of that game, it wouldn't hurt them. Or we can do, hey, let's take the top seed team. They get a bye. We're already going to send them to the college football playoff, and let's take the second and third place team, and that'll be our conference championship game. So it is a de facto play-in game to the playoff. Or enter this scenario. What if we do this? What if we say 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3? We have our own little set of semifinals. The winners get to move on. And then you get an extra game. Maybe you get a little more TV inventory. Maybe you get, where is this? Does the calendar work? So this is all that's being discussed. And even crazier is if you have one of these leagues where there's 4 bids. How do you get to that point? Because you can do a whole variety. First 2 are in, the other 2 are playing opportunity. So that's what, and with that, you're going to see this season start a week earlier. We're going to start seeing college football start played in August permanently. Whether that's the 30th or the 26th or however that falls, that week 0 or whatever you want to call it, you'll start to see that be week 1 as we grow old here, just to stretch this thing out and to give more calendar and runway for some of these things to kind of play out. But that's I hope I've made sense there, Cowan. If I haven't, then I can circle back. But these are things that are absolutely being discussed, will be discussed, and all that. But you got to get to the playoff part of it first. And I don't think Brett Yormark is super excited about this aspect. But see, the problem is he and everybody else is going to be told to be quiet and go sit in the corner, because they have got it in writing. We can listen to everybody, but we get to do what we want if we're the commissioner of the SEC and the Big Ten. They get to decide what happens, and you kind of sign your right away here for fear that they would break apart and do their own thing. And now they're gonna exercise said power.
As a college football fan, my leg is kicking like a Cocker Spaniel because I'm being scratched right where I itch. This is amazing. I would have never thought that realistically we could have got here. But I felt the same way about just getting into a real playoff anyway, after it took 100+ years and they came up with 4 just next level brainiac thinking. I thought, we're never going to get to an actual playoff. I'll be darned. All of a sudden we do. On campus contests. The whole kit and the caboodle, Chris. I thought, I'm living in a fantasy. But this to me, even a step further in that direction, just as a college football fan. And you're toss in there about conference championship weekend or weekends or whatever it could look like. I'll take all of that too. The conference championship game right now is just another hurdle for a member from that conference. And while it is another entertaining football game, and I'm certainly glad to have that, it's mostly an obstacle for a conference like champion or regular season front runner to kind of contend with. So would be interested to see that manipulated in a different sort of way. But as far as chunking the committee out the window, good riddance. Sorry you were ever involved to begin with. And taking more so the human element out of these things, I'm glad to have. Now, as far as the discrepancy between power conference automatic qualifiers, the reality is a difficult one to embrace. I would certainly say that. This more so as a Texas Tech fan, speaking from a local perspective now. And it's simply because I just hate the fact you're not sitting at the bigger table. Would I care in any way, shape, or form whatsoever about sentimentality or greed, or be listening to, the talk of negative impact on college football if I was actually involved in the larger group? I seriously doubt it, because I don't consider their mission to be to sustain everybody else. I wouldn't view that as Texas Tech's either, if they were included or among those programs you were kind of making reference to earlier. So compartmentalizing those two things is sort of difficult to embrace, because on one hand, again, as a general college football fan, I think the product's improving. I think it's going to be the best it's ever been for us, the consumer. And we consumers have basically been never on the list of those that have even been in consideration as far as what they're trying to put forth. But now they've made this turn. But from a Tech fan perspective, as a Red Raider, it's kind of difficult to swallow, Chris, that you do embrace a system that categorizes you as a lesser. But the reality is what the reality is. We all know what it is. He who has the gold makes the rules. They got more gold in those two conferences, at least for the time being. And I would still say that I think there is a tremendous will and a tremendous effort underway to best position Texas Tech to eventually still try to be included in those upper echelon categories, whatever that might look like sometime down the road.
Yeah, there's a variety of, we'll see what we get here. Whether it's 14 or 16, I don't think that, because a 16 team would not change the AQ part of it. It would essentially open up a few more at large. And so maybe a slightly better chance that in some years, maybe you could get 3, although some would go, dude, don't kid yourself. They're giving that extra at large or whatever to the Big Ten or the SEC. Probably true, but whatever.
I'm not so sure about that though.
Yeah, but I mean,
more intermittent than you might assume.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that. Yeah. But you can view this from and most people that are going to consume this show are going to say, I'm viewing it from a tech standpoint. But like the general college football fan, may say, oh yeah, like what kind of some of the things you're saying. Oh, this is great, more meaningful sports. I love it. And what's interesting is that I would offer up this, and I think this point needs to be made, is like, okay, you're going to diminish the committee. Like what exactly did they screw up this year? Like what mistake did they make? Because I don't think they really made any. And I will offer this up too. I'm curious to see how much more money, if any, there is from the folks that have inked a deal with you to show the playoffs, because I don't think the ratings were just great for these very first games, which now there will be more of. And so I think that is interesting. But it is about the money, and this would allow them to do some different things to ultimately create more revenue for themselves and all that. So is the general college football fan winning? Because I think even some are suggesting that even ESPN folks that have been named anonymously, and you know how you and I feel about anonymous sources, but in this case, the anonymous source maybe makes a decent point. No, they didn't F up the market, but maybe that's exactly what they're saying compared to the anonymous source that we mentioned a week or so ago, whatever it was, about Texas Tech's portal class. But they are saying, okay, you are going to alienate 75% of the country before this sport ever kicks off if this is the way you grease the wheel here. And you're basically like kicking all these folks out. And whether that's reality or maybe being misjudged a bit, I don't know. But I think that the folks from the 4-letter network, somebody there is kind of like going, hey, man, be a bit careful. So
I think caution is advisable, but I would also say I don't think it's 75%. I think it's a fuzzy 50%, because we're really talking about the Power 5 landscape being about 65-ish, and there's about half of that included now in those categories. But I do also think, since you've still got a path to inclusion with 2 automatic qualifiers, potentially more, for the ACC and for the Big 12, I shouldn't say potentially more automatics, but potentially more bids on the back end. The half that's still sort of being diminished still has that pathway. So it's not total alienation, but I do get what you're saying. There's a large percentage of what was previously a power landscape that will feel like they're a little bit more so shoved out into the cold. But maybe that's just the continued, sort of progressive reality. And, as for the committee, I don't like to view them through a lens of screwing it up or not screwing it up, because I think it was a fool's errand to begin with to involve Condoleezza Rice picking college football teams to compete for a national championship. And I'm just taking a name as an example. Whenever you finally cast a wide enough net to certainly err on the side of too many as opposed to too few, then yeah, you're going to have a picture that more so resembles something that people can accept. And that's what you finally had, thankfully, this time around. But moving away from the era of the newspaper writer, the voter, the congresswoman, the commissioner, the athletics director, what college football has always been, Chris, I kind of consider to be a good thing. And I don't know. I think in most eras, I've also considered that to be very good for Texas Tech, because I think your chances have always been better on the field as opposed to in a boardroom, or in like an AP writer's mind, just for selection or inclusion. So we'll see if that maybe would be the case when the rubber meets the road. But for the most part, I'm just glad for this now to be a little more so resembling what happens on the field. And I think as an example, you're talking about like last year's playoff field. Always falling in love with the shiny records that can emerge from the group of 5 landscape, I think, is a common trap. I think we saw it again last year. And I wonder if maybe that's something that could maybe shake itself out a little bit further, in this new type of setup. But I don't know, man. There are plenty of pros and cons. So I'm going to love to hear from Locked On Texas Tech listeners and viewers on this, because I know there's going to be a wide range of opinions.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is important on kind of how this changes the, I mean, really, there's no other way to say it. It kind of changes the sport in general. Is that there's a couple of byproducts that would happen because of this. It's been widely reported, okay, the SEC would then go to the 9th conference game, because they've been trying not to do that, because TV was like, we're not going to pay you any more for that. But now they were like, okay, let's just do it. And we need to be able to create less ties amongst our conference standings if we're going to base who's going to the playoff based on conference standings. You're also going to see I think, I don't know if the right word is like meaningless, but like a lot of attention just taken away from any sort of non-conference scheduling, and that really is kind of a non-factor. Okay. Because it's really just going to be about how you finish in your league. The end.
Do you think that like motivation to test your team against top shelf opponents would still lead to compelling matchups there, or will that kind of be foregone?
I mean, that sounds good in theory, but I just don't know. I don't know if most will operate this way. So here's what's going to happen. I think like I'm curious myself, like all these contracts that you've got on paper with Texas Tech from into the 30s with some Power 4 schools and things like that. Do those get canceled? Do those get changed? Like what is everybody's MO at this point? Because what's about to happen is, and again, we'll follow the money here, but like the Big Ten and the SEC are going to come up with a series of games or an alliance schedule. They're basically going to like create something and sell this inventory like separately, or come up with another, and they will make more revenue because of this. And so we'll just pit Ohio State and Texas together. We'll let Oregon, play Florida. We'll let, like create some of these non-conference games. And they're willing to do it now because it's like it doesn't ultimately matter. Like they're not going to be punished for a win or loss or whatever. But it's also like, heck yeah, we'll play non-conference games. Heck yeah, we'll play all these juiced up non-conference games. because again, these are in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really affect the runway.
That sounds to me like another win for the fan, doesn't it? Or
if the general fan, but here's what's going to happen. This also creates an even further gap between ACC and Big 12, because any sort of schedule strength component, you've created your own, but basically what they're going to do is the byproduct of this schedule alliance is they're going to almost guarantee that they're going to get any sort of buys or any of hosting or anything along the playoff. Like, it may be now a pipe dream for Texas Tech to ever be able to actually host a playoff game, because they will have widened the plate, if you will. The plate is now 19 to 27 inches, depending on how you want to view it, if a lot of these things come to fruition. So,
yeah,
again, I'm just trying to paint a picture here. You follow the money. That's the most important thing. But it's just about that plate not being quite wide enough for those two leagues, and they're just trying to, turn it into a driveway, if you will, and create so many advantages for themselves that it's going to be very difficult for those not in those two leagues, if we're just being honest.
Was already a long road to hoe. So
Yes.
At the end of the day, I don't know if that reality really even changes, but yeah, they're making the driveway. They own the concrete truck, the concrete company, everybody. It's all SEC Big Ten imprinted on the side of the vehicle. So I don't know what alternative path there would be, Chris, other than total exclusion. And obviously you don't want to go down that road. But I think for a long time, as we started our conversation with, you kind of saw this snowball coming and heading in this direction. And that's why we've brought up these very numbers before. Would you take 2 if they were going to get 4? But they said it would stay that way. And, of course, saying anything is going to stay some certain way in this era of college sports, also a fool's errand, I think. So be advised, stand by for further change regarding this developing situation. Chris, we'll hold on tight and buckle up for whatever could be coming our way and how it'll affect the Red Raiders, the Big 12 at large. And looking forward to seeing how it plays out, man. Appreciate the time and your perspectives as always, and we'll see you for the next one.
It's 17 inches. Just leave it alone, man. It didn't do nothing to nobody, man. It's been 17 inches for all the time. Don't just. Hey,
didn't we just have Major League Baseball actually expand bases? So I'm sorry to report, man.
Not home plate. Not home plate. It was the other ones. But yeah. Anyway, that's one of my favorite analogies in life, and it certainly applies here. But yeah, hopefully we didn't confuse anybody. Most of this is being discussed right now. There's some meetings going on. There's some more meetings next week. The powers that be at all levels, nationally, conference-wide, all that are all, and you're going to start to see a lot of reporting. We'll try to do our best to, because again, I do think it affects the Big 12 and Texas Tech and all those things. So we'll kind of do that as we go here. But in the meantime, gear up for country roads rolling into town. The Duchendorf Cup. Yeah, that's right.
Indeed,
yeah,
the battle for John Denver's soul.
Damn right. And it's a Red Raider, man. So sold out on Saturday for a noon tip, and your last Saturday remaining home game as we get prepared for that one. So we'll come back next time and kind of discuss some of those goings on. But 17 inches, remember that.
That's wild to think about. Yes, and if you do leave this episode confused, hopefully just as much confusion as you showed up with. I don't think we increased it any. Maybe we just maintained or even lessened, but there's going to be a whole lot of moving parts to this. So again, buckle up, stand by for further change. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks as always for the time. Shout out to the everydayers, of course, and get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Hit the show notes to check out the link for a free 14-day trial as well to become a Matador Mob Insider. That's your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. For Chris, I'm Casey. We hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.